those of you that just came in, I was mentioning that we were just going to
People don't say that.
let everybody finish their sandwiches and then wander around the building, because I think that's more interesting than having those in the meeting.
Come on in, welcome.
But we'll show you where construction's going to occur. We'll show you the Elastic Gallery project that's happening.
I'm kind of like welcoming to
And then take you down to collection storage. See all of the objects that we're talking about bringing up through the expansion. So I think the city owns the building and the collection, and so it'd be interesting for all of you to see what that collection is and what the museum's behind-the-scenes role is, which is to take care of objects in perpetuity. So, perpetuity is a really long time. And for those of you who just came in, we could do the introductions again. I think I met all of you. Julie Decker, the museum director.
Brian Steele, deputy director, overseeing operations.
Monica Shaw, the director of collections and chief conservator.
Todd Bell, chair of the board.
Kirsten Anderson, deputy director and chief curator.
Debbie Fitzgerald, contract administrator, Ms. Patty.
Sharon Lane, this is Holly.
I'm Robert Harris, I'm the CFO of the municipality.
Amy Zaboski, representing the great area of Chugia people from anywhere.
Breakaway Republic.
After when I knew you were the CFO of the museum, because I know the CFO of the museum.
Rose Coley, I'm the Assembly's budget analyst.
And I'm Sharon Beasley. I'm a legislative aide for these two, and I'm just training in other projects.
Paul Holman, Assembly East Anchorage, and Mr. Trainer couldn't make it today. He's on litigation, and Ms. Rejection is healing from surgery, so she regrets to be here.
Please give her a hard time. So on the expansion side, I was mentioning that internally the construction starts February 1. So right around the corner we'll start creating additional columns and increasing column size to allow for the second story to be built on top of our existing one-story part of the building. We do plan to stay operational throughout. There will be some sections of the Discovery Center that get truncated a little bit, but it'll hide the construction, so it'll be fully finished walls that the public sees, not construction barriers. So while that space gets smaller, that's really the biggest impact we'll see to summer visitors and school groups who will be able to access the space at all times. A lot of the work inside the building occurs in staff areas and our prep shop areas, so internally we're a little bit stressed out about all the stuff we have to move, but from a public standpoint, that's not a huge impact. And then we've been talking to the Department of Transportation quite a bit about traffic impact and how to minimize that. And so right now we're looking at, we've planned on starting steel construction in April, but we're delaying that until May because we've agreed to have construction start at 4 a.m. and end by 2 p.m. So by starting in May, you buy a little bit more daylight in those early hours because it can be safer. Should be a pretty quick timeline in getting from here to May, and we'll have signage up, we'll have a website, we'll have a live cam so people can follow construction, but we'll also, and we've already been doing a lot of work to get commuters informed about any traffic impacts. But at this point, the plan is to we will use a parking lane and part of the first lane into 6th Avenue, but at times even try to pull the crane back from there so that all lanes are open. But
are the workers going to have to park in the neighborhood?
So the workers will park on the parking lot that's across the street from us. It's a diamond parking. There will be some construction laydown of materials on A Street in just a little plaza that we have there. But a lot of the construction laydown is further down C Street at Davis Constructor's Yard, and they'll transport materials. We're trying to minimize street impact. A little bit extra cost to all of that to the project, but it seemed to make the project a lot more public friendly. So. I think a lot of you saw the news announcement. The donation is half from the Rasmussen family, half from the Rasmussen Foundation. So The construction is privately paid for. We don't anticipate using any funds outside of those funds that have been designated, so the project is fully funded. It's not something we're going to go out and be fundraising for. The Alaska Gallery is beginning in July. We'll start to remove 1,000 objects from that gallery space. We'll move them into the first floor galleries where you're probably used to seeing our art collection there. It'll be visible storage, and conservators will be working in the space, so there'll be also a way for the public to engage and anticipate with that, see the objects still, even though in a different setting and format. And we'll talk a lot about what museums do in caring for objects and what it takes to take care of something forever. And they'll get to interact with conservators who are working on the pieces to get them ready for the new installation. So that gallery will be brought back down to a shell that's 15,000 square feet. Then it gets turned over to Brian, who's the head of facilities, and we need to bring that up to new specifications in terms of climate control and air handling, and get ready for the new exhibition, which will open at the same time. So in September 2017, we have the north and south of the building essentially being brand new. So it should be an exciting moment for the public. We also, as part of that, will reconfigure the atrium a little bit. With these two projects, the atrium becomes the heart of the museum again. It's a pretty sentimental space to a lot of the public. People like me got married there and had their proms there. So the staircase will move right now, and I think I mentioned this at one of our meetings, but right now you go up the stairs and it takes you to a wall and to the admin offices, so not super exciting and a little confusing to the public. So we'll split the stair, and then there'll be a major gallery on either side. So I think from a wayfinding point of view and from the public, it'll be exciting. It gets every museum can only show a percentage, very small percentage of their collection at one time. Museums were started to take care of things, not really to be public institutions. So it's really in the last 50 years that it's been understood that these things have a lot more meaning if the public has access to them and conversations around them. So we're pretty excited that we'll have a lot more of our collection out and accessible to the public through this. So I think the Smithsonian's at like 0.5% of their collection that could be
it might even be
available to the
smaller.
public. But we do expect we should be able to bring about 200 paintings out of storage and into galleries. The museum's encyclopedic. It's art, history, science, culture. Right now we have the Smithsonian Arctic Study Center. That's our permanent culture gallery. We have the Discovery Center, which is our hands-on science center. We have the Alaska Gallery that has a history narrative. And so what we're missing is the dedicated space to the art collection. So this kind of completes the mission, completes the long-term vision in terms of the building, providing the whole story of Alaska through all those things. We're also hoping to introduce some natural history in the way we present the Discovery Center and science, so that I think people are fascinated by our flora and fauna in Alaska and some other ways to talk about it that we think would be meaningful to the public. So, is everybody done eating? Should we wander?
We need to get some of the masking things from the Russians.
Should we get the baby mammoth?
Well, they're finding people around a lot earlier.
Yeah. There is a strange federal law that right now museums in the U.S. and Russia cannot exchange objects at all. And I don't think that's going to change for quite a while. So there's some incredible exchanges we'd love to do with our Russian counterparts. Not really possible right now.
Julie, I have a question.
Yeah.
Our last work session, we talked about kind of updating the museum contract. I haven't heard anything else about that. Where are we at with that?
So our contract is through 2017. I think from the municipal side it was targeting that period for any updates to the contract, but Deborah might have more information.
Yeah, I don't, I'll check with Ralph.
Yeah, because Ralph, he's like, oh, there was a couple amendments he was looking to draft, and they seem like they were simple ones.
Yeah, I got some paperwork on that would be able to send you the work session, but I hear where Ralph is doing.
That'd be helpful.
Julie, as a public facility, even though it's a private funded project, do you know if you're able to access the old native hospital site at a laid out facility for efficiency's sake? We did that with the convention center.
They did look into some other possibilities downtown and then decided it was,
Just use their yard.
they just use their yard, yeah. We looked into a lot, we looked at the Park Service lot and talked to a lot of our neighbors, and then it just seemed like less impact to rely upon Davis for that. Okay. Field trip? Okay. Yeah, come on over. Yeah.
I think Patrick's still got
Oh, you're right.
cell phone charging on.
So this is the atrium that became part of the 1986 addition to the museum. It's kind of become the living room for Anchorage in a lot of ways. A lot of community events held here, a lot of community events. We know that with expansions, there's even more of a need for public space. Anchorage also doesn't have a lot of large gathering spaces, so the museum serves a lot of different nonprofits and other community events. But this is the stair that we're talking about reconfiguring. So the stair will be basically pushed against that wall. It'll become a split stair. Right now you can tell that you don't, it'd be hard to wayfind your way around and know where you're headed or where you want to go. So major signage. And that is where the expansion will be, is instead of seeing those windows on the second floor, part of the that we think history is interesting and important, so we're actually interested in retaining part of the history of the building. I think you know the story that Elmer Rasmussen was mayor in 1968, and he said every great city needs a great museum, and he got together and founded the Anchorage Museum. It was a borrowed collection at the time to open the museum. For those of you interested in the family history with the museum, I think there's a lot of misperceptions and common perceptions about that relationship, but it was founded by Elmer Rasmussen. The Rasmussen family has been managing the museum's endowment and contributing to that over many years. Ed Rasmussen kind of inherited the museum from his dad, at first I think reluctantly, and then grew to love it himself. Has a very strong interest in the art collection of the museum. Part of his motivation for funding the expansion is that he's worried that a lot of the paintings may leave the state if they don't have a home, that for all of the long-time Anchorage families, there should be a place to celebrate these objects that were in private homes, that really tell the history, that become very personal stories to people that grew up here over a long period of time. The Rasmussen Foundation supports a lot of nonprofits in the state. But this is the major gift, the largest gift they've given, but also has not been a funder of operations for the museum. We've received a few project grants. Ed Rasmussen does not fund museum operations, but the family has invested in some capital projects. So for people who think we rely solely on the Rasmussen Foundation, they've been incredibly generous to us, but day to day we make our own way. This is part of the 1968 building. These are panels that were incorporated into the 1986 edition to recognize that history. These are, if anybody remembers Alex Combs, who kind of became the grandfather of Halibut Cove and Homer, ceramic artist, and these were cast concrete panels. But this is where the new expansion goes. So in 2017, when you come up the stairs, there'll be a new entrance to 25,000 square feet of new gallery space.
Farther from here, how much?
A little bit. It's about 12 feet of an increased footprint. I mean, the footprint increases a little bit. We creep towards the sidewalk, but mostly it's building a shell on top of the one story. But because structurally, you can't, it's really hard to put all the weight of a new second story on an old first story. You kind of have to build a structure over the existing structure, so the footprint is demanded. Any questions here? Go to the last.
You'll either shift on this later.
So the Alaska Gallery has been one of the most visited galleries since 1986 when it opened. The problem is that the story ended in 1986. The gallery was designed around 1980, so oil and gas was discovered. A lot of the diversity of our population was just starting to evolve and change, and so it's really important that we update the story to think about how we think about Alaska today, to tell more cohesive and comprehensive story about Alaska Native people, to update the language that's used to describe people in the galleries, and just to recognize that visitors these days expect more when it comes to interactive exhibitions, depth of content, and we can do a quick walkthrough. You can see that it's, when you look at the rest of the museum, it's stated. It's a very exciting project to us. We've worked with a lot of community advisors and visitors groups. It's really something that's been in the process for almost 15 years. Exhibitions are, for museums, are tricky. When you think about a permanent exhibition, you need to build flexibility within that. You know that times change, research change, language changes, objects change. So we're building a permanent temporary exhibition. So I won't give you the history of Alaska, sure. But I think part of the major function of this space is not just to introduce visitors to Alaska's history before they go out to Denali and everywhere else. That's part of what this gallery has become, as an introduction point for people who are stopping in Anchorage to go elsewhere. But it's school groups who use this gallery the most. I think everybody who's been through the elementary school system in Anchorage knows that you come to the museum at some point for your field trip. When we added the Smithsonian Arctic Studies Center, that allowed for new ways to talk about culture. The contrast of that gallery to this one made us realize even more that it was time to update this space. But we'll walk through the Arctic Studies Center, but you can see that there's incredible objects of Alaska's native culture in that space, and what it allows us to do is tell a fuller story of Alaska in here and to explore that in new ways. So one of the things we thought a lot about with our most recent strategic plan was that for a long time we've had this idea that Alaska's and Anchorage is remote and we needed to import everything to Alaska, and it's super exciting for the museum to bring exhibitions from around the world to Alaska and from the US. But it's also really important for us to think that one of our most important stories is to tell the story of this place and to really represent the complexity of Alaska and its landscape and its people, and to generate things that get exported. So we've worked really hard to curate exhibitions that start here and then travel elsewhere. We have exhibitions in California and Atlanta and around the US this year, Portland, Tacoma right now. Our Arctic Ambitions exhibition is there. So we want to become our own spokespeople for Alaska. Alaska should speak for Alaska and the Arctic rather than exporting our voice. So that's been an important part of what we do. I also think one of our gems here is our long-term partnership with the Smithsonian Institution. That began in the 1980s, began with Senator Ted Stevens, who actually went to the Smithsonian in DC, and they gave him a tour, and I mentioned that only 0.5% of the Smithsonian's collection is actually on view to the public, and the curators at the Smithsonian showed him drawer after drawer after drawer of Alaska Native objects, and he began a conversation about how do we get some of these back home to be with the people who made these objects, celebrate these objects, where they have the most meaning. And the Anchorage Museum was selected as the place to house those objects. And we have a multi-decade agreement with the Smithsonian Museum of Natural History and the National Museum of the American Indian. And these are 600 objects that are on long-term loan from the Smithsonian. It's also an Arctic Studies Center. There's programs that are about language reclamation, about studying
The Tsimshian people
materials
originally,
of Alaskans. We bring
came
conservators from all over the world to
Skeena
study
River
materials
and the
that you
Nass
don't
River, and then the
necessarily
coastline in
see elsewhere,
between
like
there in
gut
northern
parka
British
and
Columbia,
porcupine
near what is
fields.
now Prince
We
Rupert.
work with artists who are
It goes
interested
back
in
approximately
traditional methods
10,000
and
years.
materials so that they can explore them in new work.
There was a time when
But this is an incredible
there was a
gallery to
great
tell the
deal of
story of the
strife
people of
between,
Alaska, but also to
our
say
people in
these
our
are not
village,
dead nor dying
the
cultures.
Church of
This is about
England,
a
Church
continuum.
Missionary
This is
Society,
about saying these
and
are
government of
contemporary
Canada.
cultures too.
And over 800 of my people
continues. That was
got
one of
into
the
canoes,
really
and it was about a
important
100-mile
things
journey.
of developing this
And we
gallery.
formed this
Most of
village
the
called Metlakatla.
exhibitions were curated by
The church
Native
and the government
elders
felt that
who also
the
went
only way to
to
get
Washington,
ahead in
D.C.
the world
and worked with
be,
curators to select the
to
objects
speak
that would tell the
English.
story.
And adopt not only
And then Monica
Christian
will head downstairs.
way of living, but also clothing, commerce.
We might show our pride in being Tsimshian by living a healthy lifestyle and encouraging others to live a healthy lifestyle. We might show our pride in our Tsimshian heritage by
You hear stories about how the bears were respected and treated them.
The Sukbit mask in Kodiak is it's a tradition that's finally coming back.
Monica, I'm just going to call you.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. Wait till Lindsay goes away. So, the museum collections include art and objects, which most people recognize and are aware of, but it also includes our archives. And we have the second largest photo archives of Alaskan material in the state, and probably third or fourth in the country. We have 575,000 individual images. And the archives are right here at the front of the building where the public can come and access our collections, our archival collections if they don't want to come into the museum. That was one of the main reasons for bringing it to the front, is that we wanted to provide access. We want people to use this resource that the city has. We also have a library, we have maps and rare books that are phenomenal, and people come to use it all the time, and we're working towards digitizing quite a bit of the collection. As you can imagine, it's a big project. But I just wanted to mention that we also take care of those, and we're going to go look at some objects that are going into the Alaska Gallery, and then some artwork that's going to be going into the new part of the North Gallery.
Thank you, sir.
Watch your bags and things. There's a lot of things out. You can avoid it. Yeah. So come on in this way. So our art and object collections, we have about 26,000 individual pieces, which seems like a lot, but on the scheme of things, for most museums, we're considered kind of a smaller to medium-sized collection of art and objects. But we collect a variety of items. We have boats,
We have small tools, we have clothing. I thought I'd share some of our state-of-the-art storage and some of our ivory collection, which will be going into the new Alaska Gallery. So in this one cabinet, there's 1,000 individual pieces of ivory.
Did you count it this one?
We do have to keep an
Count after you
inventory,
leave.
and we do inventories yearly, and then over a 5-year period, we inventory every single object in the collection. So it's a mix of more items for sale versus older pieces. Come on in, and everyone can get kind of change. So some of the work that we do in here are funded through grants that the State Museum actually provides. So that's how all of this material and the person who did all this work, we were able to have an intern for 9 months who helped with this. Because methods and techniques have changed over time, but we have just a variety. And as you can imagine, we have 26,000, but then something like the Smithsonian National Museum of Natural History, they might have 100,000 of just Alaskan items. And we keep track of every single one. And we have a database that every single one is entered into that has descriptions, photographs, information about the donor, information about the maker, all these things. And we have an open door policy for researchers, artists, descendants from these regions. We make every effort to accommodate researchers, and so that's one of our primary ways that people access the collection. We have some larger items here. We also have lots and lots of dolls, which often go on exhibition. Variety. So the room we're standing in was part of the 1977 edition, and then it was reconfigured in the 1985. And then these cabinets were purchased over a couple years in about 2008, 2009, about that time period. And each time we try to bring up the level of care.
So you can actually get mice in these?
These are actually for moths.
Oh, for moths.
In here, because there's a particular type of moth that loves hide and fur. Mm-hmm. It actually likes the fur more than the hide, and we are very careful about having infestations because they wreak havoc on the collection, and it's irreparable. Yeah. So we have you might see them in other places, and yes, we do use them for mice.
Yeah, okay.
We try to monitor. And so really, this is a preventive rather than a dealing with the issue.
Yeah.
So we have an active integrated pest management program for the whole building that the conservation group take care of, along with Brian Steele and his group. So this is a fish trap that was made for an exhibition from the Yupik area. And so it was actually physically made on site along with this kayak frame during an exhibition that we sponsored, that we traveled. Originally it started in Bethel, then it was here, and then it went down. It went to Fairbanks, Juneau, Washington, D.C. These are the kinds of exhibitions that we do a lot and will continue to do as well. And we acquire objects often during that time period. Should we go back out that door and go downstairs? So.
Yeah, but that frame looks rather new.
It is, but both of them were made by traditional makers who've been making them. They just were never used, but they could be used if this one was covered, obviously.
It's great that you were able to get it before it was lost.
Yeah. Well, we have one covered right here as a fish trap that is very old.
This one?
Wonderful.
You can go ahead, I'll see.
So, I don't know, Brian, we're going to talk about what the construction zone is from here this way for the impacts for the buildings. Come on, Christine.
Excuse me. Thank you. So what happens with this particular, it seems more concrete and stable. I mean, where are they going to be?
Brian can speak to that.
Yeah.
About the work.
Like,
So what happens on, it is a
cement slab right here. We're not going to do any jacking or anything whatsoever. They'll be saw cutting out squares for the new footings, and then they'll crisscross the cuts and just lift those pieces out and backfill this cement.
And then new columns or
It'll be a footing put in, and then eventually a still.
So we're gonna go downstairs, unless you want to show them right now. We'll go downstairs. Yeah.
No. Not quite one foot enough.
wedge. That was right.
So, any of you who have been down here in previous years, when the 1985 edition was built, this was expanded. They dug out, and they created this space, and expanded painting storage is what we called it. And this was shared with the cafe. So this was all catering, and then these two rooms were where all our loans and temporary exhibitions came into here. And then there were offices down here, muni offices and museum staff offices. When the 2009 edition was built and the cafe moved to the other side of the building, the collection was able to secure this whole space, and now we use it for all the collections, which is wonderful to have that added space and also being able to control the climate better and take care of the objects better. And then in recent years, we've had state grants that have improved our storage, and we've maximized all the different rooms here. So we're going to take you into the main painting storage. And here it's a little mishmash of things, a little bit of a holding area. We used to have paintings stacked up against the walls, behind the racks, against all these pillars, against all the cabinets, and now we have the opportunity now to get most of things off the floor. And then when the new Art of the North galleries are built, come on in, we're going to pull some racks out so you can see this is sort of the optimal storage that we can provide. And as you see, we have some empty racks that can then grow into, but when 200 pieces end up going into the new galleries, that will allow us to then acquire more, but also to the donors who are interested in having things exhibited. And we rotate our art collections on exhibit quite often. And so things get framed, and then once they're framed, they get sold. But some of the, Julie, do you remember some of the ones that had some of the pieces that are selected? So, as you can maybe tell, some of the frames are fairly dusty. So one of the things that will be really exciting is that some of the HVAC systems and air handler systems will be upgraded through the edition. And then the same goes for the Alaska Gallery on that side for the HVAC that operates that side. But all of these items get cleaned, examined carefully if they need any conservation treatment. A lot of these have been treated over the years. One of the other founders of the museum was and he was a proponent of preservation, and so he actually gave money to all the three big museums in the state, Juneau, Fairbanks, and Anchorage, so we benefited the most for conservation. And we're one of the probably earliest museums on the west coast of the United States that have endowed conservation funds. I mean, it's incredible. They were those founders of the museum in the 60s probably had heard about the Florence flood, had heard about the conservation work that had been done, but they were much more progressive thinkers than most museum benefactors in the lower 48 who were interested in other things, not realizing that if they didn't set up money for conservation, you couldn't then exhibit these items. The good mix here as well. Just a lot of variety. There's some things that have been on exhibit before that people haven't seen in a while. New acquisitions. We're going to be able to mix and have a good selection to show the full story of Alaskan art.
One of the things the museum is strongest in terms of collecting is native artwork, from objects to artwork. We have a world-class contemporary native art collection, so we hope to feature that as well.
And we store by size. We try to maximize the rack. So subject matter and artists don't always go together. We have something from 1899 next to Spence Guerin, which he probably painted this in the 90s. And Dan Drew, that looks like it's from 1978. He's a Juno artist. We have one of the largest collections of Eskimo drawings. That's sort of the term. So we have incredible depth of artwork there. I don't know if there's any framed up. I showed you a few earlier. Yeah, those are Zieglers and Lawrence's and Lambert's. These are some of our new acquisitions. We've been the receiver of some very generous donations of Sidney Lawrence's and Eustace Ziegler paintings, and these are some of the ones that have come in the last 5 years.
Speaking of which, who's going to get the stuff from 4th Avenue Theater? I know that the Sidney Lawrence has already been sold, I think. Or somebody has already.
There's a lot of conversation going on about the murals that are inside. The problem is they're 30 feet tall and fit in almost no public space right now.
Okay,
So, yeah.
just in the new development, if that's the case.
I know that's part of the discussion that is being taking place. Probably ought to check in on that.
They're beautiful.
Yeah, they are.
They're freezes, right? Freezes?
Yeah.
Don't lean against that.
Yeah. I mean, they seem really, there's no flexibility in the aluminum, so they do. So these newer ones, which are here in the center, have a little bit more rigidity for earthquake. I remember I worked here in the mid-90s, and one of those long rolling earthquakes, might have been in 95. I came down after the earthquake to check on everything, and the old racks that were here in the middle, which were put in 1977, all had come out because it was parallel to the wave as opposed to perpendicular. It just depends on where the earthquake comes and how it rolls through. But yeah, so we try to mitigate against those kinds of things. So new ones have more difficult starts that they can't
Another
roll
example why you need to fill the room so that it can't go anywhere.
It's not on wheels. And the goers will all be on wheels.
Yeah, this is terribly organized.
There's
Yeah,
also
so-
a lot you don't see that's in flat files.
In these mat files, they're also full. Yeah. So in this room, there's about 3,000 to 4,000 pieces, individual pieces, and they were all photographed and inventoried during this renovation project. That was one of the outcomes of being able to, having this money for the construction, we then committed our staff to doing that, and that just means more access. If more people can see the database and it's select pieces that they want to view, then we can pull them out and bring them upstairs or work down here.
We are an exhibit-driven museum. We always have been. So part of our collecting criteria is will it come out on public display, will it be used in exhibitions, and that's part of what drives our collecting. So it is important to us that the public has access to these things in lots of layered ways. So we can head upstairs before you guys depart to show you where the impact will be to the Discovery Center. And lots of questions.
I know that the state has a program where they loan art out to various state facilities and so on and so forth. How do you interact with that program? Seeing
Different purposes. I mean, the museum is supposed to take care of things forever. So putting them in corridors and places where you know they'll get damaged is in conflict with our mission in some ways, but there are some city organizations that we work with, like City Hall, where we do provide our work with those spaces, but a lot of it needs to be in conversation about how much will be exposed to daylight and how much will it be in protected areas, because otherwise we're not doing our job and caring for it forever. So the state program was developed to really be a loan program for other spaces.
And it's not part of the state museum. They have a separate.
It's a separate program.
It's a separate collection that they purposely buy artwork for that purpose.
Yeah, no.
Okay. Well, can I take your photo first?
Are you going to display it?
Are you going to need it? So the front runners in the municipal attorney's office.
So we've been trying to be more equitable with having things in public spaces, so having them in conference rooms or having them in so in City Hall, it's easier
similar altitude in the basement.
So you can see we've started marking where columns go and places that will be impacts, so where you see that means impact. This will be the first area impacted by construction starting next month. Where you see the corner of that wall, that'll be a wall, and that gets ready for exterior construction. So we'll move a lot of the exhibits, try to integrate them into other spaces, and consolidate a little bit. So from a public point of view, it'll look pretty clean.
You're not fine.
This is the 1968 that we're in right now.
So the building's going up. I'll just show you the other area. Oh, you get in the middle and I'll do it. Go for it.
See if I can maintain structural. Popped. Try again.
Yeah, try again. Slow and
Story of my life. That's all right. We need a little bit more lather on this thing. Try one more time. I need someone more skilled.
We'll Photoshop the bubble.
There you go. Does it take a long time? You're done in 5 minutes.
From a public standpoint, this space that you see from this wall to about where you're standing gets walled into to be a transition space for all the construction that's coming in, a place to store things, a place to put just crates of office people, or use their office space as a column goes through their space. So, in terms of interior impact, we hope to minimize it and retain it as much as possible. We've been making phone calls, but
You're saying this will be placed somewhere else inside?
we will either find new homes for it here, or we have a storage space that will be keeping exhibits in. But this is also a space that we want to include more Alaska and natural resources. it's an opportunity.
Do we have any off-site space?
We have a warehouse that we do store exhibit objects and giving out our collection. Oh, that. Oh, wow. Yeah, I didn't know that. You could jump on that. We're looking forward to creating a project that we hope is positive, that at a time when there's not a lot of construction, that it's adding something to the economy and to the city rather than detracting from that. We hope it represents growth in the future for people.
Where do you go after this vision?
You know, I think the park in front of the museum has become so important that building there would really be kind of a negative impact. So we thought the only thing to do would be to dig under that ground. So right now we're not going to talk about master planning. It's going to get to September of 17.
Excuse me.
Hi, guys.
Sneak through this little circle.
What's that? Yeah, I mean, I do think long term we probably do need off-site storage if the collection's going to grow. We do need more public parking. I'm working with the city. Sorry. Is there a place you can locate it around where we want parking?
Is there still parking downstairs?
Come on.
Is that staff parking?
Fire department and staff, and during the daytime, and then in the evenings and the weekends it's open to the public. But when this was a municipal building, a lot of people established parking spaces down there. That still exists.
I had one up in the federal building.
Okay, thank you so much. Good to see all of you. Happy New Year.
Thank you, yeah.